Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special earlier edition of Sir Hunt on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, here in the United States on a gorgeous 81-degree day. Terrific weather outside. Going to be going out there, testing out here in a little bit after this. Earlier start due to previous engagements I have going on at my original scheduled time. So I'm going to get right down to it. For some of you newbies out here on a special topic like this, I devote one show to one topic. And given the circumstances of the event today, it does deserve its own show and its own recognition. So I'm going to go ahead and get right down to it. Every time we have a historical event, for whatever reason, it's always fresh in our minds, as we all know, whatever it is, especially in the sports field. NBA championship, Super Bowl, World Series, World Championship, you name it. But for this one, it had everything and then some, the good, the bad, the pretty, and the ugly, before, during, and after. This one took place 43 years ago today at the outdoor pavilion of Caesars Palace in Las Vegas in front of a then record crowd, 29,000, which was a record at the time for what turned out to be a super event and a super fight that basically racked up all the dollars and garnered all kinds of attention. It was the battle for the undisputed heavyweight championship between the great Larry Holmes and Gerry Cooney. Undefeated champion versus undefeated number one contender. Of course, how do we get to this point? Is what I'm going to talk about a little bit. And the buildup, which was all over the place, among many other things. The fight and what happened to them afterwards. We know that Larry, as I touched on the other show about on the Holmes-Norton show about how Larry Holmes won the title from Ken Norton in 1978. Made a few successful title defenses against fighters like Mike Weaver, Trevor Berbick, Ronaldo Snipes, Ernie Shavers, and Muhammad Ali. But we all know the Holmes-Ali fight had no business taking place for many reasons. You know, I touched on that before. I'll get onto that here in a minute. So he's basically still looking to get himself out of the shadow of Muhammad Ali, because we have now in the 80s, and we know Ali was the premier athlete, not just only the 70s, but maybe ever. And Larry Holmes' time was always going to be viewed as after Ali, looking to find a way to get out of the shadows of Muhammad Ali, especially when we consider that fight October 2nd, 1980, that we know that had no business taking place. So here he is in the middle of that long reign as the undisputed heavyweight champion. Not really undisputed, but the real champion, because he had the lineal title at that point. Looking for somebody to put him on the national spotlight after many successful title defenses, because he wasn't getting the credit and the respect he felt he deserved. And, you know, his time as an underrated heavyweight champion, it felt like it was overlooked, because guys like Sugar Ray Leonard came around with his, you know, persona that captivated the sports world. Or Marvin Hagler came around. Even a fighter like Wilfredo Gomez was out there. But it seemed like Larry Holmes, despite his greatness, was just vastly overlooked, still known at the time as after Muhammad Ali, looking for something to put him in the limelight and to basically separate him from that particular distinction. So we enter a standout from the state of Massachusetts, northeastern of the United States, a standout project named Gentleman Gerry Cooney. Fighter who basically was a rugged brawler, vicious puncher, could knock you out with either hand, had some solid wins at that point, at the back end of the 70s and early 80s over guys like Ron Lyle, Jimmy Young, and the standout was the one-round obliteration of the post-prime Ken Norton, which had Norton slumped in the corner. And that prompted him to the distinction of the number one contender. And basically, people view the Ken Norton fight for Gerry Cooney as his coming out party. And that was where we started to get the build-up for this particular showdown between Larry Holmes and Gerry Cooney. Fight was originally set for March 15th of 82, but during the build-up, it was revealed that Cooney had an injury, and that got pushed up to the date of June 11th. And the build-up for this particular fight was basically one that where it was interesting. We consider two of the more interesting personalities at the time. We know Don King with Larry Holmes. Everybody in the fight game or in the sports culture knows what Don King was made of. And Dennis Rappaport, who was the manager of Gerry Cooney. And Dennis Rappaport himself, like Don King, a very intriguing personality for the sport. Also one that managed and sold fights in weird and unique ways. You could probably look it up. But the way these two prompted this fight and built it up in one of the most sensitive and controversial ways, started to set fireworks in the most unimaginable and crazy ways back in 82. Because this wasn't thought, the stuff we see today in the political field, it was started back in 82 with this fight. That's how Don King and Dennis Rappaport sold this particular fight in a way to put, people in seats, draw revenue, and it started to get to a point to where the escalation point got extremely hot, and it took a while for tensions to start to calm down. We know the story with Gerry Cooney. They try to build him up as the so-called Great White Hope, which Cooney himself said, I didn't even buy myself into it. I'm just a fighter. I don't partake in it. Even Larry Holmes basically said, I don't view Cooney as any of that. I just view him as a fighter who just want to take my head off and take my championship. But we know how the buildup for fights go. Don King and Dennis Rappaport try to sell this in the most wild ways that set fireworks, tensions, and high blood pressures all over the place, to where people were on pins and needles and wondering if this fight was actually going to take place. Because when it comes to the buildup, this got so really hot and almost got personal, almost got too personal, to a point to where you wonder what was going to happen. I mean, Larry Holmes basically selling his fight, basically saying, if he had a chance, he would punch Gerry Cooney in the mouth for free, among some of the other things he said to the buildup. Basically, and he brings up the fact that if it wasn't a perceived black-white situation, we would be talking about millions of dollars. But I'll talk about that in a minute, because it set all kinds of records for 1982. But the mass amount of buildup, it got so wild to a point to where Don King had to bring Reverend Jesse Jackson into the middle of this to try and calm things down a bit, because even he himself said he never seen anything like it in the fight game, because it was intense and it was built crazy. Nothing like it. When we talk about some of this, not only that, because of the so-called Great White Hope they want to build in with Gerry Cooney, there was white supremacist members trying to involve themselves into this unnecessarily so, because of all of this, as the fight began, there were police snipers across the roofs of some of the major hotels outside the Caesars Palace Pavilion in Las Vegas, where the fight took place, in fear of something escalating to extreme levels. Some of the stuff we see out here today, there was that kind of fear back in 1982. So that was how crazy this fight was built up. I mean, it is already spun off in some of the most crazy ways. I mean, Larry Holmes was always one that's trying to fight for respect. He tried to sell it. That's how he always sold his fights, because he always felt like he was shafted by the boxing intelligentsia, of course, due to the fact he came after Ali. But of course, how Gerry Cooney was just wiping the opposition out in less than 3 rounds. They started to fall more in love with him, and it rubbed Larry Holmes and Don King the wrong way, to where Don King tried to sell this in some form of a race sell, which we know that sort of thing in a business aspect of the sport sells, but it almost spun off to where it got nearly out of control. And once again, that thing sort of reared its ugly head. So this is what we had in the buildup for this. Holmes said he had to have security over his house because he had fears of his own. Even HBO's Larry Merchant, who was an analyst for the HBO version, said he had fear of some form of danger that was about to take place, given everything that built up for this, as there were snipers all over the hotels of Caesars Palace in Las Vegas surrounding it to be ready and for anything that was about to happen, because it was possible this could have happened, because it started to get that intense, especially when we talk about 2 intense personalities like Don King and Dennis Rappaport, who sold this in some of the most wildest ways imaginable. They viewed Gerry Cooney as America's hope, America's whatever you want to call it, especially when you consider the fact that the American intelligentsia was rubbed off the wrong way by Larry Holmes' persona, which was time and time again with him in his ongoing career. Everybody knows this. But that was how this buildup was, and it was crazy. Nothing like it. And they try to put more on Cooney and take less of it on Holmes. And basically, as that was going on, you could see the fire just lit in Larry Holmes because he was looking for a standout performance to take it out on someone for everything he felt the boxing intelligentsia had done to him. He was looking to take it out on someone, and we had a feeling Gerry Cooney was going to be that victim. And as it was going on, as the introductions took place, maybe the one that broke the camel's back was they introduced Larry Holmes, the champion, first. And everybody knows in ring announcing, you announce a challenger first, champion second, and a title fight. For this fight, they announced Holmes as the champion first, Cooney as the challenger second. And that was another thing that added to Larry Holmes' fire, which he basically said, they want to disrespect me every way possible. They didn't want to give me the credit, and they did. And that's what happened. So you had a feeling something was about to go down on this night, and it was not going to be good for Gerry Cooney because Larry Holmes was motivated and driven to basically show the whole world just how great he was. And basically, in the midst of all of the baloney that took place in the pre-hype between the two fighters and the buildup, as the referee's instructions from Mills Lane was taking place, Larry Holmes casually touches Gerry Cooney's glove and let's say, let's have a good fight. And it was basically over with because we know once they touch gloves and the bell rings, the baloney squirt goes out the window. And that's what happened with this. You talk about this particular, the fight itself, basically it was a case of Larry Holmes showing the whole world why he has the greatest punch maybe ever, his left jab. And he started to dictate the pace early. And of course, in the second round, it was the 1-2 that floored Gerry Cooney. So he gets the early lead. It looks like he's about to take control of the fight. You know, he's in control, utilizing the ring, showing the whole world why he is the great Larry Holmes. But the fighter that Gerry Cooney is, wouldn't give in. He would have his moments. Had Holmes hurt at the end of the fourth round from a sneaky body punch that where you thought for a minute maybe he would sap the energy out of Larry Holmes because Holmes sort of wilted over as he walked to his corner. And you think it was going to be a momentum switch. But as the middle round started to come on, both fighters started to have their moments. And the greatness of Larry Holmes started to show as this fight was gradually going on because anything Cooney tried, Holmes had an answer for. And Larry Holmes just started to slowly bust up and beat up Gerry Cooney as his face was starting to get beat up pretty good. But one poignant moment in this fight where, once again, we're reminded of the tensions that took place in the buildup, where Dennis Rappaport, the manager, tells Gerry Cooney, America needs you, as a way to prop him up. And it spins off to some of the most wild perceptions all over the place in the boxing community, whether it was for the racial tension or whether it was to try and prop up Gerry Cooney, who was starting to take a beating from Holmes as this fight was going on. Dennis Rappaport shunned it off, calling the whole thing baloney squirt. But that's what he did during the fight and as a way to prop up Gerry Cooney, who was starting to show signs of getting beat up. And as the fight went on, even though Gerry Cooney tried, now we're starting to resort to a bit of dirty tactics by him, intentional or unintentional. Nobody can really guess. Having lost 3 points for a low blow infractions, including the third one where it was an uppercut right where Larry Holmes can't produce babies anymore. And Larry Holmes had a natural male reaction to getting hit in the spot where he can't have babies anymore because there was a heck of an uppercut that hit him right below the belt. And basically forever remembered as Gerry Cooney's biggest punch. That's how it's always going to be remembered. Larry Holmes a few years ago says, oh yeah, I still feel that punch 2.5 decades later because it got him quite good. And you thought for a minute, maybe that would find a way to get Gerry Cooney going, but it didn't. Only thing it did is that continued to prop up Larry Holmes as he continued to administer the beating. 1-2s, the left jab, right cross, which has been the Larry Holmes staple throughout his iconic, legendary career. And as the fight was going on, you had a feeling it was not a matter of if, but I wonder of when Holmes was going to get Cooney out of there. Floored him again in the 10th. Got up, and another 2.5 rounds of beating being administered by Holmes to Cooney's face. And as the 13th round was going on, and you saw Gerry Cooney starting to hang on to the ropes as Holmes was starting to tee off, Victor Valley, the trainer of Gerry Cooney, steps in and basically hugs Gerry Cooney and tells the referee Mills Lane, this fight is over. And that was where Larry Holmes had his moment where he retained his heavyweight championship on a TKO win in the 13th round. So Larry Holmes successfully defends his championship in it was actually a better fight than maybe you would generally think, but you had a feeling, maybe in hindsight, Gerry Cooney didn't have much of a chance because we talk about good fighters to great fighters. Gerry Cooney, I put him in the very good fighter category. I mean, better than good. He was very good, had some good wins for this moment. But there's a reason why Larry Holmes is a top 10 all-time great heavyweight. And this was the night he showed it. And you could probably say this was his peak because he showed why that he was a tough out during his reign as a heavyweight champion of the world. It was this particular night where he showed the world that that's who he was. I mean, slowly but surely breaking down and delivering 1-2s to Gerry Cooney was basically all she wrote, and it started to add on as the fight was going on. I mean, we could talk about all the hype and everything we want, but as we know, all the talking doesn't mean anything until you get out there and get the job done. This is a perfect example of it because there's a lot of talking done by Dennis Rappaport when it came to the side of Gerry Cooney and those around him who try to prop him up to something of some kind of a legendary character that he really wasn't. Even Cooney himself said it. And no one's going to disfault Cooney for not trying because he did try. He was just in the ring with an all-time great. And the difference sometimes shows when it comes down to the nitty-gritty and when you want to win it most. And everybody knows Larry Holmes wanted this moment, and that's where he wanted to show the world what he was capable of doing. Because he, as the fight went on, a clinic of how to throw the left jab, right cross combination, he started to show it, and Cooney's face started to show the effects of it. That's exactly what happened. Cooney's a good fighter. Holmes was a great fighter. That was a difference. 43 years ago at Caesar's Palace, that's what happened today. Larry Holmes retains his heavyweight championship and probably the biggest win of his career when he just systematically broke down and beat up Gerry Cooney, a very, very good fighter, but probably that was his end point because when you get found out like that the way Cooney was, that's going to be all she wrote. So that's basically what happened with Gerry Cooney. Of course, that was the dead center of the long reign of Larry Holmes' 7.5-year run as heavyweight champ. This place in history, as I said the other night, secure. This was probably his landmark moment. Maybe slightly ahead of when he beat Ken Norton to win the heavyweight title. Or you can fast forward to his win in 1992 over Ray Mercer in a turn back the hands of time moment for him when he put a jabbing clinic on Ray Mercer the same way he did to Gerry Cooney. They talk about Gerry Cooney. After this fight, basically broke him a little bit because he said, he was reminded of some of the things that people said about him, about him being not good for anything among many others. It drove him to alcohol and substance abuse. Fought sporadically, I would say no more than 6 times the rest of the way from there to 1990, where his career ended on a 2-round obliteration where he just got pounded by George Foreman with the right uppercut and the right hand combination that just sent Cooney down and out for good. But Gerry Cooney was basically one of those cases, like most athletes, you build him up to a certain hype to try and make him to something more than he wasn't. But when it comes down to seeing what he's really made of, you basically got your limitations, and that's exactly what happened to Gerry Cooney when he fought Larry Holmes. Same thing happened to him a few years later when he fought Michael Spinks. Same thing again when he fought George Foreman. He was a very, very good fighter, but when it came time to need to get to that next level to try and win a championship, he couldn't get it done. And it's not just like Gerry Cooney, who's a hell of a fighter and a hell of a human being outside the ring, but that's how the reality of the sport is. And I'm sure he'd be one of the first ones to tell you because that was what happened 43 years ago today. Now, we talk about all the things that happened during this fight with the buildup and how they have the revenue. At a near $7 million paid gate, which later on tallied at the end of the day to supersede $40 million, which was a record at the time. This found a way to surpass Leonard Duran 1 in Montreal because that was a high gate, but this one found a way to surpass that. In a rare case of where an even split of the two fighters took place, the champion and the challenger Both took home exactly $10 million as a first of its kind, and basically packed the house of the sports pavilion of Caesar's Palace outdoors that superseded 29,000. At the time, it was a record for an American sporting event. It set all kinds of records. So if you want to do that kind of a buildup, they found a way to do it. And we had two fighters who had the kind of followings the way Larry Holmes and Gerry Cooney had going into this fight, because it had all kinds of celebrity attention, especially when you talk about Sylvester Stallone and Woody Allen, just to name a couple. You're going to get that kind of, that kind of financial flow and that kind of celebrity support and fan support watching the fight. It was televised on closed circuit, later replayed on HBO Sports with Barry Tompkins, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Larry Merchant, the greatest premium calling trio in boxing history. And of course, later replayed by ABC's Wide World of Sports, spanning the globe, fear, thrill of victory, agony of defeat, with the defeat having the skier falling off 720 times off a hill. But that's what this kind of event built as in 1982. And you can coin the phrase super fight all you want. Right? And this is before super fight, the word super fight was brought into the boxing culture. This was a genuine super fight and a genuine super event, not just for the sport of boxing, but for all of sports and entertainment, because it was one that was all across every major network, from the pre-fight hype to all of the tensions that took place, to all the news reports that talked about all the tensions that went on before the fight, to the stories of having the police snipers on the rooftops, to even the fight. That should tell you just what this was event-wise. You can say divided the American culture. You can say divided the boxing culture. Have at it. I won't go that far. But that's what this was 43 years ago today. And we talk about the two fighters later on, Larry Holmes and Gerry Cooney. Despite all of their the bitterness that took place before the fight, they became nothing more than the best of friends afterwards, and still are to this day, because after his career was over, Cooney established some form of a charity organization to help retired fighters seek some form of stability after their career is over in terms of jobs, finances, and housing, among many others, which is just a wonderful thing. We talk about what he's doing for fighters because he's one of the ones that went, through the same thing himself. And on his behalf, one of the guys that helps him out and being a guest speaker, none other than Larry Holmes. So all of the tensions that took place then is basically water beneath the bridge, because they're now the greatest of friends. They talked about a money-raising exhibition or charity fight to where they have the gloves as big as size of pillows in 2020, but that was shot down due to the so-called pandemic, or whatever the hell you want to call what happened in 2020. But they got together and put together a terrific event where basically you had to pick sides, Larry Holmes or Gerry Cooney, and that's what you did. We talked about the legacy of Larry Holmes on countless of occasions. As I said before, everyone's going to dissect it any way they want. You're talking about an all-time criminally underrated athlete who still doesn't get the respect he deserves. I mean, we know about Joe Louis's 12-year, 25 successful title defenses. That's never going to be touched. No heavyweight in this time will come close to what he did. And he did it 7.5 years with 20 successful title defenses. Many reasons for it, of course, being the political aspect that what the sport has become. But that's what Larry Holmes' legacy is, was, and always will be. The greatest left jab in boxing history. Not just that, his ring IQ in that ring, second to none. Because he knew he had the left jab and he knew he could beat anybody with it. That's where the ring IQ comes in. His ability to use a ring, use a jab. Ring generalship is what we don't talk about enough in the sport when we talk about scoring fights. For his time, Larry Holmes mastered ring generalship. That's what he did. And that's what he did on this night, because Gerry Cooney, just aside of a couple moments, couldn't really do anything of significance to Larry Holmes, because Larry Holmes was driven to be successful, and he wanted that moment to where he basically let the world know, I'm here and I'm him. And that's what Larry Holmes did on this day 43 years ago. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal fighter. And, I know he says a lot of outrageous things, and I mean a lot of them outrageous, controversial, and some you don't agree with. I'll admit, as a fan, some things he says I don't agree with either, especially what he had to say about George Foreman not too long ago. Doesn't turn the fact the guy's a top 6 all-time great heavyweight, and that's where he belongs. Just a phenomenal fighter. This was his night. Gerry Cooney could be satisfied collecting probably the largest payday of his career of $10 million. Helped prop the fight to where it turned out to be the largest gate in boxing history at the time, at least in the heavyweight division. But that's what we had 43 years ago today over at the outdoor pavilion of Caesar's Palace. They called it the place where legends are made. And certainly the event was a legend, and Larry Holmes' place in boxing history as a legend escalated with his performance. Just a standout fight, a terrific event. Granted, what led to the event was weird and awkward and something, I don't like to engage in, but sometimes if that's what it takes to sell fights, generate money, that's what you had to do. That's what these guys did. Now we have the controversial personalities like Don King, Jesse Jackson, and Dennis Rappaport being a part of it. Controversy is always going to be the thing with this. And we know in the fight game, one of the things that sells in our sport is controversy. And that's what it did. And it certainly did well. We talk about surpassing $40 million in 1982, which today probably easily flirted with half a billion dollars, because with the revenue of 82 versus 2025, compute it any way you want, especially today where we know that stuff really sells. It would have sold out any arena here in the States or worldwide today, because when you have that kind of a stature and that kind of a selling power and those around you that know how to sell, you're gonna find a way to get it done. I mean, we can talk about everything that's gone on in the sport over the last several years. Nothing would compute to how fights sold when you had Don King and Dennis Rappaport getting together like this. Granted, some lines were crossed, intentional or unintentional. I don't know. I won't go that far because I won't use my platform for it. You can make your own assumptions. But that's how you have to sell fights sometimes, and that's what happened here. And Larry Holmes, even though he'll still be remembered for being after Ali and before Buster Douglas, Evander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis of the 90s, he's still an all-time great, whether you like it or not. But this was his finest hour. This was the peak of his career, because after this, he started to hit his downturn gradually till he lost his championship to Michael Spinks in 85. Try to get it back, of course, in the rematch. And, of course, made the comeback in 92 where he just peppered Ray Mercer and gave Evander Holyfield and Oliver McCall all he can handle as he tried to regain the championship in the 90s, losing close decisions. That's all you got to say about Larry Holmes. Just nothing short of spectacular, nothing short of phenomenal. But this fight against Gerry Cooney was about especially the last 4 or 5 rounds when he really started to beat Cooney up. From his point of view, it was the closest thing to perfection that you're ever going to see and you're ever going to get. Because when you talk about delivering the left jab, right hand combination, Larry Holmes knew how to do it. And that's basically what broke down and beat up Gerry Cooney as that fight wore on. No shame to Gerry Cooney. I mean, he was a very, very good fighter. Some of it might be hype, but he did do something right when he basically obliterated a bunch of fighters to become the number 1 contender for this. But when you talk about good versus great, watch this fight. Gerry Cooney was good. Larry Holmes was great. In a carnivalistic atmosphere, Larry Holmes basically sold the carnival and sold it well and showed the whole world why he was an all-time great. This was just his peak year and will forever be probably his finest hour. He had a lot of great performances, obviously. The Norton fight, how he came from the deck to blast out both Ernie Shavers and Ronaldo Snipes, just to name a couple. But how he just tattooed Gerry Cooney in a fight that had everybody watching, from Caesar's Palace to closed circuit television to HBO to ABC. Probably could say this was the peak of his career. Just a terrific all-time great. He was sensational. Nothing more to be said. Oh, I wish I could talk about more of this more often with today's fighters, but it's never going to happen, because you see what's happened to our sport. Because back then, it was as political as it is today. I mean, it was. I mean, I'm not making any bones about it. I mean, there are some questions whether or not Gerry Cooney deserved the number 1 contendership. But, they put him in title eliminator after title eliminator. He got the job done. So he got the title shot. You can say whether he deserved it or not. It didn't matter because he was still out of his element when he fought Larry Holmes. Didn't matter how the governing bodies worked or how the rankings worked. That's how it was at the end of the day. Salute to Larry Holmes and Gerry Cooney. Hope both of them are doing well. And Larry, please chill in the comments about George Foreman, okay? I mean, I get it. You still not satisfied what came with you after Ali, understandably so. You get overlooked as an all-time great, understandably so. That's why I put you in my top 6. I know you had the comments about Rocky Marciano and the jockstrap. We know that. But the comments you said recently about George Foreman, not the time for it. But you're an all-time great, and I'll always acknowledge you as such. Whether they want to, it's up to them. Because anybody with a brain knows Larry Holmes is an all-time great, like it or not. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I will be back on Friday for another One Fight series. It is an event where one punch during the fight changed a fighter's mindset forever. I think some of you guys could figure out what that fight is and who the fighter involves. And also touch and spinning off of that, I will also elaborate on some of the what-if athletes and wasted talent athletes of our time. All that will be Friday night. No show tomorrow night. I will be back here in a bit for those that are following me on the X platform on talking some NFL. I will be back Friday night with the show. Anyone who misses out on any of my shows can listen live on the Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify apps. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in life. If you take care of yourself first, good things will come your way. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless and enjoy the day.